Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So today I have a Yamaha Pacifica here on the bench, and this is one that I've wanted to try out ever since I got one of those earlier Yamaha EG-112C guitars. And I've been looking around thrift shops and things trying to get one of these things cheap, and I finally came across one. It's in need of a lot of work. It's got rusty strings, it's missing the jack, and it just needs some TLC in general. So we're going to do a little bit of an inspection today, a little bit of repair, and we'll see what this thing has to offer. Now normally I like to take a look inside the truss rod hole and make sure that the truss rod nut is not stripped and that it operates freely, but in this case these strings are so incredibly rusted that I'm afraid to even tune them. So I'm going to go ahead and take the strings off and then we'll go from there. Now with the strings out of the way, I did go ahead and take off the truss rod cover and I determined that the nut is not stripped, so I'm good there. I don't know if the neck is straight, but that will come later. The next thing I'm going to do is try to remove this pickguard. It's got this really nasty, dirty pattern on it, and it actually is because it still has the plastic on it. So I'm hopeful that I peel that plastic away and the thing looks like new. But let's go ahead and get these knobs off and start to try to get that plastic away. Alright, well this is not exactly pristine, so I'm going to hit it with a Clorox wipe here because I don't know what this brown stuff is, but I don't want to touch too much of it. Alright, well it's at least clean now, so I'm going to go ahead and take off the pickguard. Alright, inside here I find a few interesting things. This looks a lot like the EG-112C that I took apart, by the way. It's got two ceramic bar single coil pickups and a pretty standard humbucker. Everything's 2-wire, there's no split on the humbucker or anything. Looks like it's using mostly shielded wire. It's got 250K mini pots. No, I take that back. It's got one 500K mini pot and one 250K mini pot. Then it's got a 5-way switch. This is a switch that I've seen on several early Indonesian and some later Korean guitars. It's not one of those PCB style switches. It's kind of a different mechanical spring tension switch with traditional contacts and copper connectors. Well, the next thing I'm going to do is take apart this jack, or get this jack out of the way, because I've got to install a new one. So I'm just going to heat up the soldering iron. Well, this is the jack that I removed from this guitar, and I wasn't able to get it on camera, but I heated up my soldering iron and desoldered these leads from this jack. This jack happened to be damaged in shipping. You might be able to see the tip bent over significantly and the wafer is starting to separate now. It's not salvageable, but it is the typical jack that you would find on most entry-level guitars these days. What I'm going to install instead is a Switchcraft jack, which is a little bit beefier unit, but it just happens to be what I have on hand. It's what you might find in more Mexican and American guitars today, and it'll fit just fine. I'm going to keep all the other components of this guitar stock so we can test it out today. Alright, well the jack is installed now and everything is repaired and wired in. So let's continue with our analysis of this guitar. This is a made in Indonesia model, as it says here on the body. The model number is PAC-012. It's stamped here in the cavity, and it's also on a small sticker up here on the headstock. It's got these semi-closed, I consider them almost open gear tuners, because if you remove the screws, this back cover will almost come off and you'll see the open gear itself. The neck is a maple neck. I assume the fretboard is rosewood, although I don't know if it's some other variant. The body itself is some sort of a lighter wood, and it is solid wood. It is not a laminate body. Hardware wise, the old jack plate was plastic. The new one is metal, but that one I made and installed. The strap buttons are pretty standard. The tremolo is a nice model, and it's got bent steel saddles, so that's a little bit of a nice feature. And it's got, like I said, vintage style tuners on it. I'll give you a little bit better view of those. And I call them vintage style because they do not have a nut on the top. They only have screws that hold them in on the back. And it's got a single string tree let's go ahead and take a reading on the pickups. So here on the meter, the humbucker reads 9.03K. The middle pickup reads about 6K. And the neck pickup also reads about 6K. Before I throw a set of strings on here, I'm going to go ahead and treat this fretboard to a nice coat of conditioning oil, especially since I cleaned it earlier with that nasty Clorox wipe. Alright, well, I've done all the maintenance I can do to this thing without strings on it, so I'm going to be putting on strings next, and I'll do that off camera, but there's a couple of things I wanted to point out really quickly first. The first thing is that these pickups, the single coil pickups, do have staggered poles. They're raised up off the surface slightly, and the staggering follows the radius of the strings. The humbucker is completely flat and does not have adjustable or staggered poles. The neck heel is also kind of unique on these guitars. It looks a bit like a Telecaster shape, but it's 22 fret, and the neck pocket itself extends beyond the 22nd fret, so it's definitely not a Telecaster pocket. If you've ever seen my video on the skateboard guitar project, I used one of these Yamaha necks on that thing, and I actually had to build a template to route the neck pocket into that guitar with this shape. It's a little bit later now, and I've got the strings on. I used a set of hybrid Slinkies, Ernie balls. They're 9-46. I've got the neck all set up. I've checked a few of the specs here on the neck. I checked the neck radius, by the way, and I thought it was a 12, but Yamaha on its website actually says these are 13.75, so I don't know what to believe there. But at any rate, I checked the neck relief, and I got it set to 12 thousandths. Also put the truss rod cover back in after I did that. By the way, that truss rod nut is a 5mm nut. I also set the action and the pickup height. The action is a normal adjustment with a little Allen screw for the bridge here, and then of course Phillips head screwdriver for the pickups, and my favorite little action gauge. So that's what I use to set the action, and I also set the pickup height that way. As you can hear, I've got it plugged in. I did do a little bit of testing of the electronics, and I just wanted to test something out real quick before I play it a little bit, and that is the volume and the tone knobs. I haven't really tried those out. Okay. I had heard that the tone knob doesn't make much difference on these guitars, and actually this one sounds like it does. I didn't know if that was a function of it being a 500K volume pot but only a 250K tone pot. I guess that's just something I read online, but it's not necessarily true on all guitars. Alright, well, let me just show you really quickly. The bridge humbucker is actually fairly hot compared to like the middle position or the neck. And this is just on a regular little tube amp with moderate gain. Again, that's the neck. Middle. And you can hear that the humbucker position has just a lot more growl and a lot more gain in it. Oh, and by the way, the weight of this guitar is actually pretty light. I weighed it at about 6.5 pounds total on my scale, and the way it sits now. Well, my summary on this thing is that it's a pretty nice little entry-level guitar. I actually kind of prefer it in some ways to a Squier or something like that. I think the pickups might not be as good a quality as some of the things that Fender's been using, especially today, but I think the tuners are better at holding a tune, and I think that the bent steel saddles is a nice feature, so the tremolo might be a little bit of an upgrade, although it only has 2 springs in the back, and I don't love that. Otherwise, you know, this body being a solid Agathis body, I did learn that. The neck being a really nice quality, maybe not quite standard dimensions, but definitely a nice maple neck with a rosewood board. I think it's a pretty good value. Yamaha is definitely a famous maker, and they stand behind their products with, I think, a lifetime guarantee. Maybe that's a limited warranty, I don't know, but I think it's a pretty good buy overall. And even though this one is probably a 2001 or so, they still sell this model today. Well, thank you all for hanging out with me on this project. I appreciate all the likes and the comments you guys give me. I love it when you guys use my Amazon links. Thank you for all the subscriptions, and I'll see y'all next time.